So hello from Green-Mopeds in London. So today we're going to give you a static review of the ECCIty Model 3, which is a three-wheeler. And as a comparison, we've put it next to the other three-wheeler that we do at the moment, which is the Aidea AA Cargo. And this is a consumer version. This is obviously a business version. But we'll go around the bike and explain a bit about it, explain the differences between the two bikes, and hopefully that will help you make an informed decision. So let's get to it. Okay, so a little bit about the ECCIty. So designed in southern France, and the Aidea is out of Japan, but designed in Italy. Okay, so ECCIty have 5 main bikes that they build themselves. They do actually offer other bikes, but they are imported. So they have 3 two-wheelers, which are a Model 50, which is a 50cc equivalent, obviously, then a 125 and a 125 Plus. What ECCIty do is they seem to go for the sort of premium end in terms of components and power. So, for example, even their Model 50 is 5 kilowatts, which is pretty powerful for a 50cc 28 mile an hour bike. Anyway, this one is also pretty much at the premium end. So for example, it has 2 5 kilowatt motors. Could actually be out of the Model 50 or maybe the 125 Plus. And in comparison, the Aidea comes in 2 versions, a 50cc equivalent and the 125cc equivalent, which is actually this one. And this one has 2 kilowatt hub motors. Okay, so obviously a lot more power in the ECCIty. Okay, as another comparison, if you talk about speed, so the maximum power, or so continuous power is 10 kilowatts, maximum power is 13.2 kilowatts, and that gets this bike to a quoted range of speed of 75 miles an hour. Although yesterday when we tested it on the A3, we got to about 70, so maybe that's a little bit ambitious, or maybe that was without a load on it. Okay, so 2 5 kilowatt hub motors in the wheel here. Okay, and the key thing about these sorts of bikes is actually how they deal with corners and therefore the sort of tilt mechanisms that they have to use. So on the Aidea, you get these 2 little handles here. Okay, so what one of them is doing is essentially a handbrake, and the other one is a tilt lock. Okay, so now I've taken off the tilt lock, and this bike will fall over if I don't control it myself and engage the tilt lock. Okay, and then this one is the handbrake. Okay, so this is actually locking the bike in its position. Okay, so essentially what you need to do, obviously, is when you stop, you need to engage both of those. There are riders out there who seem to forget essentially the tilt lock and the bike just falls over. So that is something to be aware of. On the ECCIty, however, it's inherently stable, I would say. So having ridden it yesterday, I got to a position where I could literally, it's obviously a bit hard to do, at the moment the tilt lock is on. So on the Aidea, what's actually happening is that lever is activating a cable that's going through the bike and into the back of the bike, and then there's a clamp, I'll show you in a second, clamping onto the tilt mechanism. On the ECCIty, what happens is you can either start off, as in if I go now, the tilt lock will automatically come off, okay, or I can just disengage it, and you heard that sort of, that is actually electronically releasing the pads on the caliper rather, at the back of the bike, and I'll show you that. Okay. However, what I noticed yesterday is this bike is inherently more stable. So I'm just sitting on it now, I'm holding the brake, but it is sitting upright. That isn't the case on the Aidea. Okay, and to engage the tilt lock, you just double press that button again, and then that will engage. As I said, it will come off automatically as soon as I set off. Okay, so in terms of displays, actually, while we're here, they're pretty similar, both nice colour displays. One thing that you will notice on the Aidea is although it can come with 1 or 2 batteries, you only actually are using 1 battery at a time. So you lift up the seat, these are actually controllers. Underneath there are actually the batteries. They're going in this way across the bike through a little compartment down there. And then this switch is actually switching over from 1 battery to the other. Okay, so they are looking at a way of improving that mechanism so that it will, automatically consume the battery power without you having to do that, because that also applies when you're charging. Okay, you have to flick that switch. So they are, and I think they have done an auto switch mechanism to do that. Okay. You won't see really the battery of the ECCIty unless you come down here and you look through, you see where that symbol is. That is the bottom of the battery, and it's basically going up to the bottom of the seat, which I'll show you. So this is the clamping mechanism I was talking about. Okay, so this, as I called it yesterday, this sort of sickle-shaped thing, this caliper is basically clamping onto that, and that cable there is being activated by pressing the button. Okay, but as I said, it seems to be inherently more stable than the Aidea anyway. Okay, all right. So underneath the seat of this one, you actually have storage, because this is the consumer version. Okay, so here you've got enough for, as you see, an open face helmet, and there you go. The delivery version, the seat will stop here, and they say that you can actually get a 400 litre top box on this bike, which is what that top box is in the background as well. So in terms of storage capacity and therefore carrying capacity, these bikes in their cargo version can actually take the same. Obviously, one of the big differences between the two is speed. So on the ECCIty, you're getting up to, as I said, 70 odd miles an hour, whereas on the Aidea, in the 125cc equivalent mode, you're getting 40. Okay, it is an interesting thing having a bike that you might be using for delivery that can go 70 odd miles an hour. I did actually speak to them about that, and they said they are looking at doing a slower version. But one of the things to, I guess, point out is that on the Aidea, you don't have modes. So you don't go from high mode to low mode to limit the speed. You twist the throttle and that's it. You go as fast as it will go. On here, you do have modes. So this is actually your mode switch. As I said yesterday, it's a little bit far to reach from the handlebars. Okay, so, I don't have the biggest of hands, but that is probably a little bit far to reach. And this mode here, you see it goes N, so that's normal mode, and then Eco. So Eco is going to get you to about 40 odd miles an hour, and then that will get you to as fast as it will go, so 70, let's say. Around the dash here, you've got, this is still in kilometres, but obviously you can get it in miles. You've got your consumption of battery, your state of charge down there, range. So we'll talk about range in a second, temperature, battery temperature and actual temperature. Then you've got your trip, odometer, and then your consumption in watt hours. Okay, so this is saying 48 watts per kilometre. Okay, so if you want to work that out, then you could work out the total capacity of the batteries, which in this case is 6.5 kilowatts. Okay, so it's 86 amp hour, 75.6 volt system. Okay, and on the Aidea, this is actually more because they have got 2 batteries in there, which are 80 amp hours each, but it's running at 48 volts. So that is 7.5. Okay, I think that's right. So therefore, you could do the maths and you could say, well, if I'm consuming 48 watts per kilometre rather, and I've got 6.5 to go, then I could estimate that my total range is et cetera, okay? Obviously that doesn't take into account anything in the real world, like the way you ride, the load, et cetera. This is purely a calculation that it's making. A bit like all electric bikes and all electric vehicles, to be fair. Okay, so that is the dash layout. What happens is, as you saw on the ride review, this is actually indicating when you draw more power. So these actually go blue and they sort of stretch out as you're drawing more power. Okay. An interesting little quirk is that although the bike is on, the throttle is dead. Okay. You heard that the tilt mechanism disengaged as soon as I twisted the throttle, but I didn't go anywhere. Okay, so the reason for that is that I didn't press the engine start button. So when I press the engine start button, you see go comes up, and then if I did twist the throttle now, it is active, it would disengage the tilt mechanism and off I would go. Okay. Interestingly, and this happens on a few bikes, Horwin in particular, you cannot disengage, you cannot go back and turn that off without turning the bike off and on again. Okay, so this is a one-way switch, essentially. Okay, so around the rest of the controls, so you've got your front and rear disc chambers or brake chambers for your brakes, and then you've got normal stuff, indicators, and the way you get to hazards, which is what I've just turned on, is to go left and right to one after the other, and that engages the hazards. Okay, there's no actual hazard light switch. Okay, and then quite cleverly they have done what Aidea have done with this handle. They've actually put a brake lock onto the actual brake lever itself. So you lift that and then you go, you're now free to move off. Okay, in terms of other features, what ECCIty do is they give you lots of option choices. So obviously on this one, as this is the consumer version, we've added a standard top box. You can have a color-coded top box from them if you wanted to, smaller. There is also options around the windscreen, obviously that's optional. On the Aidea, it's obviously not optional. They give you an option around having a hook added on to feed a chain through. To be honest, they should probably include that. So there's lots of other options. But that's just the way they're doing it. As for charging, so here we have their charger. This is a 20 amp hour charger. They do say that you can have an integrated, I think it's type 1 charger added on, whereas on the Aidea, you get that ability out of the box. So here is your charging port rather. Okay, so you've got your 5-pin plug there, and this can be type 1 or type 2. Okay, so charging, they state, is on the ECCIty, they state 3 hours to 90%, whereas on the Aidea, it's 3 hours to 100%, but I think that's per battery. Okay, so, and that's standard 13 amp plug charging, that's not any of the fast charging options, because again, by default, the Aidea comes, although it has the connector at that end, which is 5-pin, at the other end it's 13 amp by default, unless you buy an actual charging cable with 13 amp, type 1 or type 2 at the end. Okay, so similar but quite different. It might have been maybe better to put the cargo version of the ECCIty next to the Aidea cargo, and both of them have the same box to give you a better idea. But essentially, I guess the question is, would you pick a 75 mile an hour bike or 70 mile an hour bike for a cargo sort of role? Or would you, as I suggested on the ride review, disable the fast mode and only have it doing 40? Because then you would have a sort of a more delivery friendly version. Not many delivery companies that I know would want their delivery riders whizzing around at 70 miles an hour. There is no need for it in any city because there are no roads that you can go that fast. And also it's sort of just wasting power for the sake of it. But as I say, they are looking at bringing in a version that will be lower power and hence more range, because at the end of the day, you want range as a delivery task. Okay. In terms of riding it, if you want to look at the ride review that we did yesterday, then you're more than welcome. I think I've covered everything off, but obviously if you have any more questions, then please feel free to contact us. Oh, of course, price. They are about the same price, which suggests, well, it's an interesting fact that you're talking about, you know, roughly £12,000 for these two bikes. Does that make that one expensive, one cheap, or are they both expensive? That's for you to judge. But you are getting a lot of technology there. 2 motors and big batteries. Okay, so hopefully that's given you enough information to help you in the research. If you have any questions, then please feel free to contact us. And thanks very much.